Good evening and welcome to On the Record Decision 2017, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true, and open debate they've been looking for. Activities on the road to elections to dissolve the House of Assembly, thereby ending the life of a parliament and signaling that general elections are imminent. In an almost unprecedented act, the Prime Minister announced that the House would be dissolved on April 11th, more than a week before the actual dissolution. He did, however, offer an explanation.
I wanted to give people an opportunity to know that if they do not register by a certain date, they cannot vote. I wanted to advance our democracy. We've had a lot of debate about putting more certainty into the process. So the first thing I did was, I said, listen, even though the House of Assembly has been adjourned to the 10th of April, we are going to be having a dissolution at a precise time.
And ever since that announcement, Bahamians have been lining up in numbers at registration centres nationwide. Tonight, on the record, a closer look at the parliamentary process with former Parliamentary Commissioner Errol Bethel. Then later, who gets the failing grade? Have we failed in education and not created a sufficiently educated population? We talked to some candidates to get their views. It's all on the record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer.
On the Record is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
You bring passion, and we bring world-class infrastructure and innovation that's designed to help your business grow. You have determination. We've got your back with a super-fast LTE network, giving you access to whatever you need, when you need it. You offer superior service, we put you in control. With a dedicated care team to look after your business 24/7. Together, we have the advantage. Alive. Let's do this.
The best way to stay healthy and prevent disease is through regular checkups and early detection. NHI Bahamas will provide screening, counseling, lab tests, diagnostic imaging, and medication at no cost at point of service. So what specific primary care benefits are covered under NHI Bahamas? You are covered for annual physical exams, vaccinations, blood tests to check your cholesterol and blood sugar, ultrasounds, and x-rays. Your benefits package covers screening for cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and STIs, including HIV, mammograms to screen for breast cancer, prostate testing for men, and EKG testing to assess heart function. Your benefits also include drugs to help control your blood pressure and cholesterol, as well as insulin and other diabetes medication. All things to catch and treat health issues before they become more serious. Know your benefits under NHI Bahamas. Enrollment starts soon.
Welcome back to On the Record. Once an election cycle is near, there are some key things that we look out for: the dissolution of the House of Assembly, the writ of election, and the closing of the current register of voters, and of course the symbolic ringing of the bell. Now, to help us put all of this into perspective is a man who has up until recently been a pivotal part of this process. He's now former Parliamentary Commissioner, Mr. Errol Bethel. Sir, welcome to the show. Glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Good. We have, it's not once or twice you and I have sat in this environment getting ready for elections. But some things have changed this time around, particularly as it relates to the dissolution of the House. The Prime Minister announced that Parliament will be dissolved on April 11th. I want to start out by talking about what happens now on April 10th, the day before that.
Well, April 10th is the day when people can still register to vote. Mm-hmm. And I think they can register up until they close the stations, whatever time they close that evening. Mm-hmm. And after that, the register is closed. so that nobody can register afterward. And then everything is in motion for the next day. And the following morning, we should have the reading of what we call 2 proclamations.
Right.
The first proclamation dissolves the House, and the second proclamation announces the holding of a new House, whenever that will come after the election. So they are the 2 things that must happen on that particular morning.
People talk about, the ringing of the bell and all the other things that are related to this, but really it is the dissolution of the House and the end of that session of Parliament, correct? That indicates that an election is near.
Yes, well, not just the session of Parliament, the end of the Parliament itself.
Right.
There's no longer a Parliament. So one has to be elected to take the place of that one that has been dissolved.
Now, what will begin to happen as of April 11th within the Parliamentary Registration Department? Up until this point, they are still registering voters. People are getting on, I think it's the current register, right?
Yes.
And then, so what happens as of April 11th once that life of Parliament is no more?
Well, with the dissolution, the register that was created after the boundary changes, that register takes effect. That is what is called the corrected register, because all the changes that were made subsequent to the boundary changes now take effect. So now, in effect, we no longer have 38 constituencies. We now have 39 constituencies from that day. And so people who are campaigning in the elections are campaigning in those constituencies. And when they take office, whoever they are after the election, they will take office for those constituencies.
So individuals who would have registered after the 2012 election, are they eligible to vote in this election?
Those people who would have registered after preparation of the new register began, I don't know if that was 2 years ago or whenever it was.
Okay.
Those are the people who will be eligible to be registered. Once the name are placed on this new register, or what do we call the register in preparation, they are the people who will be eligible to register.
And I do want to talk a little
to
bit.
vote in the election.
I want to talk a little bit about eligibility of voter. What things constitute your eligibility to be able to vote in this upcoming election?
Well, your name must be on this new register. You must, of course, have been registered based on what the regulations are. You must be a citizen of the Bahamas. You must be resident in a particular constituency for a period of at least 3 months. And then you must be at least 18 years old. And once you've met those qualifications, you're eligible to be registered. And once your name was placed on that register, you can vote in the constituency and in the polling division where you were registered.
Now, I know through sort of some personal stories and experiences, people have said there's been some confusion about where they live, particularly with the boundary changes. Who do you listen to about where you're supposed to live? And this is how I'm going to sort of set this question up. I know of a particular instance where somebody showed up to register and they said, somebody from a particular party campaigning came and told me that because of where I live, this is the constituency I live in, this is where I need to register. If, as a registering or registered voter, I am unsure of where I am in terms of constituency, who is the authority? Who makes that final decision about where I'm actually living and where I'm supposed to vote?
Well, what happened was that after the Boundaries Commission met and they would have divided the country into constituencies, you need to find out exactly where you live based on the map that was put together by the Boundaries Commission. And if you live based on that map in a particular constituency, you need to know exactly which polling division you are in, also based on what is called a polling division report, which was issued subsequent to the constituency report. And based on that, you should know exactly which polling division and which constituency you are in. If you have doubts, the best people to confirm for you would be at the Parliamentary Registration Department.
So go to the main office?
Yes, for sure, they will know where you are because they have a map which indicates how the whole country is divided.
Now, in going to register to vote, which I did a few weeks ago, there was a map on the table that the folks within the center had, and I pointed out where I lived, on which side of the street, et cetera. They were able to tell me. But if in an instance like that, there is still confusion, you're saying the best advice is to go to the parliamentary registration department.
You can confirm, yes, right. You can confirm exactly where you are on that map.
What happens in a case where you think that you may be incorrectly placed within a particular polling division? Because I know that once that happens and you get to the polls election day, that could create some confusion at the polls and people challenge whether you're in that particular polling division.
I think if you have doubts, I think you should try and have that checked prior to. One thing is certain is once the register closes, and the register will close on the 11th, okay? Once the register closes on the 11th, well, after the 10th, right, you cannot make any changes to that. You can't correct it. You can't change where you live because you cannot be transferred to another constituency.
No, that's interesting.
Transfer is a form of registration, and all registrations cease after registrations, after the election is announced, after writs are issued, after the House is dissolved. Everything cease. And so you cannot have your name added to the list, or you can't have your name added to a different constituency or polling division.
Wow.
So if there's an error made, that has to be corrected by Monday. So in terms of where you live, you better have that corrected.
Well, that's very interesting. So if you, at this point, days away from the closing, if you have any doubt, would it be wise to go to the parliamentary registration department? That's the best
do
place?
it before the register closes.
Wow.
Before the register closes, you need to make sure that that is done because you cannot transfer. You cannot register or transfer after the register closes.
Very interesting. And we're going to go to break in a minute. What kinds of things do you need to have in hand, or knowledge do you need to have in hand when you go to register, or even to query whether you're in the right place? For example, what side of the street you're on, those kinds of things. Because sometimes people just, I know I live in this house on this street, but that's about it.
Yeah, you need to know your address exactly in terms of which street you're living on. And if you live near a corner, you need to know where you are from the corner, whether you're left or right from the corner, because that particular corner may be a boundary line.
Right.
So I can't just say, I live on Robinson Road. But I have to say I live on Robinson Road, maybe just east of Soldier Road, or west of Soldier Road, because Soldier Road itself may be a boundary line.
And you have to determine east, west, north, or south, with north pointing towards Paradise Island, correct? Is that,
yes.
So north is pointing towards Paradise Island, everything east, west, north, and south of that.
Yeah, when you look at the map, north is always at the top of the map.
Right.
And the bottom is south.
Well, I always say I face Paradise Island, and that's north.
Yeah, okay. The right hand would be east, and the left hand would be west.
Okay, all right, and then of course back to south. Mr. Bethel, we're at the point of our first break in the show. We've got a lot more to talk about. My guest tonight is Errol Bethel, former parliamentary commissioner, and tonight we're helping you to better understand the parliamentary process as the electorate prepares to head to the polls. We'll be right back right after this quick break.
Every day, people suffer from some sort of joint pain.
To put on my socks, to bend over to put on, I used to have, it was really pain. I don't have it anymore.
If you've been living in pain and you're tired of trying products that just don't work, you are not alone. Today, 1.5 billion people worldwide are living in chronic pain. Don't let pain deny you the life you deserve. Join hundreds of thousands of Omega XL users that have chosen to fight inflammation and get rid of pain. Now they're living a pain-free life to the fullest thanks to Omega XL, the all-natural anti-inflammatory that has more available omega-3s than regular fish oil. Get more benefits in a powerful gel capsule that is smaller, easier to swallow, and more convenient. Switch to Omega XL and experience results you can feel. Put an end to your pain with Omega XL. Visit your local pharmacy or health food stores and get your Omega XL today.
I love love sunsets. Now that I'm retired, it's the simple things in life that are enjoyable. I couldn't say that a few years ago because I never thought of or planned for the inevitable, and I never considered the debt I would leave my family in.
BAF's final expense plan. Coverage up to $50,000 and it never decreases in value. Affordable monthly payments that never increase. Accidental death coverage and no medical exam or lab test required.
Now that I have BAF's final expense plan, I worry no more.
Faster internet speeds for free when you get TV, internet, and phone. Ask for Trio from Rev.
Join the revolution.
Welcome back to On the Record. By now, you should know that you only have a matter of days to register if you want to vote in the upcoming elections. With me in studio is former Parliamentary Commissioner Errol Bethel, and we are discussing voter registration in the context of the parliamentary process. Mr. Bethel, up until I think it was 2012, only law enforcement officers and I think maybe a few folks outside that were able to vote early. I think last election, I think they may have opened it up to some other individuals. But generally, who gets to vote early in an election?
Well, definitely the law enforcement officers, those people who are likely to be sent to different parts of the country for election day. So you're talking about the defense force and the police force. And then you're also talking about election workers. They can apply for early voting. And then apart from election workers, you're talking about candidates, their spouses, and also people overseas in different parts of the world who work for the Bahamas government. Those people are allowed to vote in different parts of the world. And also students are able to vote. And some
students
people,
abroad.
Students abroad. People in some institutions are allowed to apply for early voting also, and people who are likely not to be in place on election day for various reasons, whether they're sick or that sort of thing.
Okay. So how do you then apply? So we're going to talk about folks abroad separately, but if for whatever reason, as you said, I am not going to be in place, let's say I'm going to have surgery or I'm going to be out of country for whatever reason, how do I go about applying to vote early?
There's a particular form that you need to fill out, and you must get that form to the Parliamentary Commissioner.
Okay.
And the Parliamentary Commissioner will give you a certificate approving your request, and he will make a list. And all of the persons whose names appear on that list, they will publicize a list so that all of the candidates and the parties will know the people who are on that list.
Does that include media workers as well, if you're working in the media?
I don't think the media's on that. No. I don't think so.
I think they should be a part of it. It's a busy day for folks working in media.
I don't think media is there.
Okay, all right, maybe we'll get some clarification later on.
Yes.
But let's talk about those folks who are living abroad, Bahamians living abroad. If you work for the government of the Bahamas, if you are a student.
Yes.
Yeah. How does that process work, and how do folks how are folks able to vote abroad in the process?
Well, first of all, they must apply also.
Right.
And a list is prepared for the various locations.
You apply through the nearest consulate or embassy?
You can apply through the consulate, but that must come through to the Parliamentary Commissioner.
Okay.
So he can prepare a list. And
you have to be registered, first of all.
Of course, you must be
so you must be registered
voter.
living
You must
abroad.
be eligible to vote.
Okay.
And once that list is prepared, we have done elections in, in at least 3 countries in the Caribbean so far.
Right.
Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad.
If I'm not mistaken, I think there was early voting in some places in the U.S. last election. I think.
Definitely.
Yes.
We did Miami, we did Atlanta.
Right.
And I think we did Washington and New York.
Okay.
And then we also did Ottawa.
Okay.
And London. So people in those places where we had embassies or consuls,
right.
Those persons were allowed to apply and they were authorized to vote.
And that's early voting is not on the day of,
It's done on the day of the advance poll.
The advance poll, okay, right. So you'll have your law enforcement, your poll workers, people going to be out of country, people living abroad in that advance poll.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
but definitely the key here is you have to make application. Just can't
You
sort
have
of
to
show
make
up.
an application. So a student, and also some people who may be there, say like if a student has a spouse,
okay,
or one of the workers, they have spouses who live with them, these people will be allowed to vote. Just like the candidates in the election and their spouses,
right,
they would be allowed to vote.
Because the thinking is you're busy on election day.
Yes.
Yes, within the campaign. Okay, sir, we're going to sort of continue the discussion, but a man was recently brought before the courts for voter fraud, attempted voter fraud. He registered in several constituencies. How does something like that happen? And what is the system like, or how does the system sort of protect, or supposed to protect itself from that happening?
Well, the difficulty is that people can register all over the country, and I don't know to what extent they have available lists of persons who are currently on the register in those places. I don't know. But it is possible to happen. When it does happen, I think there is an obligation to make sure that no name appears on the register more than once.
Right. But I guess my question is, how do you sort of check or cross-reference? I mean, how is it supposed to happen that if I decide I want to register in 3, 4 constituencies? I mean, there was even just a report in The Guardian recently about alleging hundreds of names being duplicated in multiple constituencies. But how should the system, I guess, sanitize all of that?
Well, the system can identify anybody whose name appears more than once. And once that happens, the system should find a way to deal with it.
And once that, if it is determined, like in this case where somebody has registered in more than one constituency, what should happen next?
Well, you have to make sure that a name doesn't appear on the final register more than once. And nobody has the right to vote more than once.
And at what point does the actual crime take place?
I don't know.
I really don't know. If you actually show up to more than one polling station.
I really don't know because I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know.
All right. Well, the lesson here is register in just one constituency.
One constituency.
All right.
Well, it depends too on whether or not people have moved.
I was going to ask that
If people have moved, they have the right to transfer. To what extent people know what their rights are. That's another something that needs to be borne in mind, because by law, if you have left a constituency for more than 6 months, you really you cannot legally go back there and vote.
Right.
You know, because once you would have been in a new area for 3 months, you should have your registration transferred to that new area.
Question. In an instance where, let's say I live in New Providence, or I have a home in another island and I'm back and forth, where should I register and where should I vote? How do I determine, for instance, if I have a home in New Providence and a home in Andros, how do I determine sort of where I am eligible to vote?
That is a very serious case for litigation. Yeah, I know there have been cases based on that in the past. And people
have come to election court.
Prior to the election court, people challenge others on the register.
Right.
And it depends on how the court rules on those particular cases. You know, some people would want to establish that they live in a particular place, and sometimes judges make rulings on those situations.
Right, right. And just before we wrap up, really, the key to all of this is, of course, is being an informed voter.
Yes.
If you, for whatever reason, are unsure of where you're supposed to go, how you're supposed to register, what is your course of action? What should you do? Who should you listen to? And who should be the final voice in all of this?
The final voice really is parliamentary, you know. The parliamentary department, they have the information, and they know what is on the register. And they're the people who can tell you what is right or what is wrong based on the information they have. Now, if their information is wrong and it needs to be corrected, people who are involved need to make sure that that information is checked prior to the closing of the register. Because you cannot change an address after the register would have closed.
So over the next few days...
So it's very important for people to go and check. And the parliamentary department, I'm sure they will make themselves available for people to check.
And don't just call, you got to go in.
Definitely, because if a change has to be made, you need to be there to have the change made.
Good stuff. Well, Mr. Bethel, I got to ask you this. Are you going to miss Election Day? I know you've been retired for some time. You're going to miss Election Day?
Well, I'll watch it. I'll watch and see what's happening.
Yeah, comfortably. Well, sir, I have to tell you, I just want to thank you for stopping by. Certainly, as always, you have been a wealth of information. I hope that people have been able to garner some great information and insight from this discussion this evening. And as we keep saying, and we encourage folks that if you are unsure about where you are, where you're supposed to be voting, now is the time to go to the Parliamentary Registration Department and to confirm that information. And of course, if you still have not registered to vote, you have up until Monday, when
whatever time the register closes on Monday, whatever time they stop working on Monday.
Right.
And they will determine whether it's 8, 9, 10 o'clock.
Once you're in the line?
Once you're there, well, they can't register on the day of.
Right. So it's got to be before midnight, eh?
It has to be before, and they will close at a certain point in time, I'm sure.
Right, to accommodate. So, thank you very much. We appreciate you stopping by. All the best to you, and continue to enjoy your retirement.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much. Coming up in the second half, we're going to discuss who gets the failing grade. Have we failed in education and not educated a population that is sufficiently ready to function? Our guests in the second half are Dr. Leon Higgs. He's the DNA's candidate for Mount Moriah. Jeff Lloyd, F&M candidate for South Beach. In the meantime, On the Record is back right after this break.
Tonight at Percy's Island Game presents Break, the party you can trust, on Thursday, April 20th at the Pirate Republic, Dockside, downtown Nassau. Free train, New York's #1 soca DJ, Close Connection, alongside Wendy, Benji, Rick Carey, and top soca DJs from the 242. Advance tickets available at Percy's Island Game, Nassau Street, and Wolf Road location, as well as Airbrush Junkies.
Need insurance for your valuables? Shield Insurance is the answer for you, offering friendly, professional service at competitive prices. Our experienced staff at Shield Insurance work hard to ensure that you get the right coverage for your car, home, or business. Now introducing our new premium financing program, designed to make it easier for government workers and employees of approved businesses to receive car and home insurance. Visit Shield Insurance on Thompson Boulevard or call 356-7202.
For news that's happening in our country, the best place to turn is Our News.
Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight.
The biggest stories on the best station.
Topping news tonight. The government collected almost...
The Education Minister, the Bahamar Claims Committee explains how unsecured...
Giving you all sides of the equation to keep you informed.
Well, in other news, police are cracking down on
the claims of Bahamar's creditors and
police are on the scene here at a popular hangout
call. Yesterday, Catholic Archbishop...
Watch Our News weeknights 7:30 and weekends at 7 p.m. only on RTV.
We are back on the record looking at the state of our education system. Our topic is, who gets the failing grade? Have we failed in education and not created a sufficiently educated population? Here in studio with me, our DNA candidate for Mount Moriah, Dr. Leon Higgs, a well-known educator at tertiary levels and the Secretary General for the Bahamas National Commission for UNESCO, and the F&M's candidate for South Beach, Jeff Lloyd, also an educator, attorney, and talk show host. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to On the Record.
Always a pleasure.
Good. Before we dive into the discussion, I've got to ask you, you're both first-time candidates, and I have to tell you I was very surprised when I heard that you had entered politics, but, you know, such is the case. I'm going to start with you, Dr. Higgs. How is your campaign going thus far?
It's going well. I've been on the ground walking in the area of Mount Moriah, and I've been extremely, I'm extremely pleased, really. It's extremely encouraging. In terms of what I'm finding or the interaction or the reaction from the people in that area.
I'm always curious as to how sort of the third party candidate is doing. You know, people always say, you know, it's a two-party election, and that's always up for debate. But what has been the reception of the DNA, and particularly the reception that you've been getting in that area?
Personally, I've been getting very positive reception. I have not been to any house or any home where I've not been welcome.
Interesting.
And that is extremely refreshing for me. I suppose this election is going to be a little different from what we've been used to, in that, yes, the DNA does not have any representation in Parliament right now. We have been around for 5-6 years. So people are now really taking a look at both of the major political parties, and they're looking at us in terms of the candidates we have, the platform we've put forward, and people are really making up their minds as to whether this time around, this is the time to give that third party a chance and actually break the stronghold that the two major political parties have had on the country.
Thank you, sir. Jeff Lloyd, I've got to ask you, how is your candidacy going?
Excellent. It's doing very well. South Beach, they call it a swing constituency.
I was about to say, it's one of those constituencies that could go anyway.
It's considered a swing constituency. As a matter of fact, history has shown that the winner of the South Beach constituency goes on to form the government. If that happens to be the FNM or the PLP, then that particular party becomes the government, as is the case now and as was the case the last time around.
You should be campaigning pretty hard.
It is a very arduous task.
Right.
Of course, it is a great joy, and it's an education to go into the homes of the Bahamian people and to hear their concerns, but also to receive from them their own wishes as to how this country should be governed, what the solutions are. And I am very impressed with the intelligence and the wisdom of our Bahamian. So in that respect, it is an extraordinary experience.
Excellent.
And like Dr. Higgs says, I've been very warmly received in South Beach. People are very keen about politics in this country, as you would understand, and they are anxious for this bell to be rung, and they have a opportunity to make a decision.
We're going to move it into discussion very quickly, but I just want to say I'm very happy to hear that people are welcoming to you, and I'm hoping that gone are the days when people would be like, oh, well, I'm voting so-and-so, get from my gate, slam the door. So I'm very happy to hear that people are engaging you in the discussion, because that means that people are actively listening, and that's important, I think, in the process. But gentlemen, we're here to talk about education tonight. Our national grade average remains a D. You both have been connected to educational institutions out the back. Have we really failed in our education system?
Well, of course. And the system has failed, and those who operate the system has failed. When you look at... Jerome, I just want to be careful about this average, this national average, because the average is a measurement of the test scores, but that's really not the barometer of how we are doing in the Bahamian society. In 2009, the Coalition for Labor produced a report through the Nassau Institute, and it was pretty much condemning about the quality of education and the kind of students that are being produced by our educational system. And they made a very telling statement. One, those students are not only not ready for tertiary education, but they're not ready for the workforce. They're not really ready for life. Now, that's a serious indictment on our society. We are producing citizens, Bahamian citizens, who cannot negotiate the vicissitudes of life in the 21st century. And that's a really serious matter. They are not functionally literate. They are not functionally numerate. They're not functionally oratorical.
And let's talk about sort of what is functionally illiterate and then what is illiterate, because I think sometimes people think the two...
Well, illiterate means that you're not able to process the information that is coming to you that the society is producing or the world is producing. You're not doing it in a way that is productive or efficient. I mean, we can take a look at throughout the public service, throughout our society, we can see whether we go into stores or we're on the streets or wherever we go, we can see that there's a challenge in people being able to appropriate understanding and analytical, processes to their lives. And as a result of that, we have a significant failure in our society in terms of social cohesion, and you can see this manifested in the levels of crime.
Yes, we'll certainly discuss that. But Dr. Higgs, over to you now. I hear Mr. Lloyd saying we have failed, but this is a failure, I'm thinking, that has to be spread across successive governments. This just did not start happening.
You're correct. both governments, PLP and FNM, have failed the Bahamian people when it comes to education. But before I talk about that, I would like to just go back to this misnomer about the D average. If you are grading on a 7-point scale, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, D is the midpoint. There would always be a D average because the average is the midpoint. So I do not discuss the D average because to me it does not make good sense at all.
So what should be the barometer and what should we replace it with? How do we know how we're doing?
There's no place else in the world where you would hear people talking about a D average in terms of education. But what we should be looking at is, for example, take an area such as English. We should be looking at what are the scores for this year? How many students took the examination? How many students passed or failed the examination? And we should look at particular schools. Did school A, 1,000 students took the English examination this year? How many of those students passed? How many of them failed? If an inordinate amount of those students are failing English, then we know that there is a weakness in what is going on in that particular school, and so we can address it. But to say that there is a D average,
So we need to change sort of the way we look at that. But where do we now start to place blame? Because in order to fix the problem, we've got to sort of look at where it started. And how do where do we begin to place that blame and then move from
there are a number of things that are wrong within the system. Number one, we need to look at the curriculum, what it is we are teaching our students. But not only that, we need to look at our teacher preparation. In other words, one of the things that we're proposing as a government is that we would be recruiting, the DNA would be recruiting the best and the brightest among our high school graduates to put into the teacher education programs. That is important, for example, before we would say, okay, we'll give you a bursary, so people would go into education because of the bursary. We need to change that, or if we do that, to continue but to look at the top tier. If you're going to look at the top tier, then you have to look at compensation. How do you compensate these people coming into the teaching profession? So another plan is to make certain that we pay or compensate our teachers as we do any other professional in the public service. But I can't leave this point and make it seem as if it's the teachers' problem, because we have some excellent teachers in the system. There's a systemic problem with, example, the management of the schools.
Dr. I'm just going to have to put a plug in because we've got to go to a break, but I want to give Mr. Lloyd an opportunity to respond here on this. The FNM government has had 1992, 1997, 2007 as government. Why should the Bahamian people give them an opportunity again to address this problem that still is not fixed?
Because the FNM government in those 3 terms, non-consecutive terms, made significant improvement in the educational apparatus. For instance, it was the Free National Movement during those 2 first terms that built a number of schools because of the lack of infrastructure in the educational system. It was also the Free National Movement that introduced preschool education, not by law, but by policy, into the system. It was also the Free National Movement that made a significant investment not only in teachers, but in teaching, in the quality of teaching modality, as Dr. Higgs says, that you're going to have to concentrate on teachers and the quality of teaching. And there's also the Free National Movement in this particular dispensation that is coming up that is going to put an end to the affront that has been visited upon the Bahamian society through this thing called social promotion, which unfortunately has in fact seems to kind of institutionalize mediocrity and failure and dumbness in our educational system. And this is where the essential transformation of education must occur, We also had in the Free National Movement an opportunity through the Inter-American Development Bank where through preschool education, going down into pre-K and so on, where significant investment was made in the building of preschool schools and school classrooms in certain family islands, including here in New Providence. So when you talk about education, there has to be major investment, not only in compensation, but also in infrastructure, which of course the Progressive Liberal Party, despite their promise to double the investment in education, has not built one single school. And the same budget that they met approximately in 2012 remains the budget of 2016-17.
Mr. Lloyd, we're going to have to take our first break in the show. I do want to say, though, that as is customary, we invited all three parties to send representatives. The PLP had agreed to send Education Minister Jerome Fitzgerald. However, we understand that he was called away to a school naming in Abaco today and could not be a part of our show here this evening. So we do want to mention that, and he did, of course, send his apologies. But stay with us. We are going to take a quick break. We are back on the record right after this.
This segment is sponsored by Percy's Island Game.
Dyson Knight and Percy's Island Game presents Play, the party you can trust. April 20th at Pirate Republic, Dockside, downtown Nassau. Purchase your ticket from Percy's Island Game, Nassau Street or Wolf Road location, and you can win $500 at the play party. If the winner has a validated Island Game account, an additional $500 will be added to that account. That's a total of $1,000. Tickets are $20 and only 100 tickets will be sold in this promotion.
Come let me play. The party you can trust with Percy's Island Game.
Tickets on sale now.
NHI Bahamas takes care of pregnant women and their babies. As part of the NHI Bahamas Primary Care Benefits Package, women do not have to pay out of pocket for pregnancy tests, prenatal vitamins, or doctor visits. You can also get a blood test to learn your blood type, check for anemia, gestational diabetes, and other health issues, as well as screening for sexually transmitted infections like HIV. You are also entitled to 2 ultrasounds, so your primary care doctor can check on your baby's growth and you can find out the sex of your child. As soon as your baby is born, NHI Bahamas covers tests and measurements to check your baby's health. And as your baby grows, he or she is covered for doctor visits from birth to 12 months old, including important immunizations to prevent diseases like hepatitis B, meningitis, chickenpox, whooping cough, and measles. With NHI Bahamas, you can have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby.
Get faster internet speeds for free when you get TV, internet, and phone. Ask for Trio from Rev.
Friends, join the revolution.
Welcome back on the record. We are discussing who gets the failing grade. We're asking, as a country, have we failed in education and not created a sufficiently educated population? Our guest tonight, Dr. Leon Higgs, he's the DNA's candidate for Mount Moriah, and Mr. Jeff Lloyd, the FNM's candidate for South Beach. As we said, we also received apologies from Education Minister Jerome Fitzgerald, who had agreed but was called away to a school naming in Abaco today and sends his apologies. Gentlemen, not every student is academically inclined. Every student is not going to be book smart. What would be your thrust, your party's thrust, in getting those students who are not as academically inclined into more into the area of developing a trade and even into technology? I find some kids are just not book smart, but you put a device in front of them and they become a totally different student. Jeff, I'm going to start.
Well, I don't, it's just unfortunate that we keep talking about this academic. People are not academically inclined. Listen, reading is academics. Writing is academics. Calculations is academics. Being able to speak and to convey your thoughts and to comprehend those thoughts That's academic.
So you think we make a pass on those things?
Yeah, no. Well, what we are doing is we are sending the wrong message.
Okay.
What we want people to understand is that there is genius in any vocation that you are called. There's genius in being a carpenter. There's genius in being a mechanic. There's genius in being a fisherman. There's genius in being a tile layer. And that you can do that to the same degree of proficiency and expertise as us broadcasters or doctors and so on. That's what we want our Bahamian people to understand. And the system is supposed to make it possible for those to express that genius in whatever ways that they want to do so. And this is exactly what the Free National Movement intends to do, as it did in some of its own previous administrations, and that is expand the opportunity for trade and technological and vocational subjects, but not just simply around the high school level, but to begin that at, say, grade 7, so that students going into grade 7 who express an interest would have an opportunity for 6 years to master some of these vocational courses, such that, like they now are unable to do, to be employable once they leave high school, or to further their education in that particular discipline, going on to tertiary level education. But to respect the fact, Jerome, that these individuals who happen to want to work with their hands,
yes,
who want to be expressive in their theatrical arts, are just as genius as those who are interested in some other profession.
And must have that sort of that basic foundation.
But the foundation must be
reading,
there.
Writing,
and you still got to be able to read a manual.
Yeah, I understand. Now, Tiggs, at one point you headed up BTVI, where that trade and technology training was coming in. Is it too late for a lot of kids who get there because they don't have that academic background, and do we wait until they're at the tertiary level? Is that too late? And if so, how would a DNA fix that?
No, but before I answer that specifically, I just want to go back to the last segment where I don't want to make it seem as if all the fault is on the teachers, okay? When we look at education, we have to look at it holistically. So you have the parents are involved. Parents have to be parents, and they have to be integrally involved in the learning of their children. We've seen that wherever the parents are involved in the learning of their education of their children, that those children do well.
But so that's, with the greatest respect, that's not a government responsibility. That has to be an individual parental responsibility.
No, but we in our society, sir, we're going to have to do some parental training and development, because we know that there is a lack of it, and yes, it is important.
To the point.
You know,
yes,
okay.
to the point. But I do want to get, though, to that question of the technical and trade training. A lot of students out of high school decide they want to go to BTVI or technical training, and to the earlier point, don't have the fundamentals.
Okay. One of the things we did at BTVI before leaving there, we started a program where we call integrating the academic with the technical vocational. We would, for example, we started to have, let's say, the English teacher, the carpentry teacher, and the math teacher would teach together. So if you're teaching English, you have the students write an order to Kelly's for me, or do a memo ordering certain things. While at the same time, you're teaching them how to use the language without saying it's an English course.
Of course.
Or if you have a room, I have this room, I'm going to tile this room. How many tiles do I need? Here are the measurements in the room. In other words, one of the things we're going to insist is that at the technical vocational level, that we integrate your academics with your vocational courses for those students who do not have the basics. But we also are going to insist that in a number of our high schools, that we start offering some of these programs at the high school level.
So we start earlier.
So that we're starting early and students will be coming.
I've got to move our discussion along. Every year, hundreds of high school students leave looking for a job. Becomes a situation where we've got all these kids, those who don't go off to university abroad, who don't attend UB or don't attend BTVI, looking for jobs. I call my MP, I call my minister. My child needs a job. My son needs a job. Those persons enter the public service. How do we fix? How do we change? And it's a question I want both of you to be able to address. When you've got hundreds of high school leavers every year looking for a job, first place they look is the public service, qualified or not.
We are unable, Jerome. Let's be absolutely frank with our people. We are simply unable to absorb every single interested employee or potential employee into the public service. We are now overloaded with the public servants. You're talking about possibly 25,000. Which is 650 to 700 million.
And they see that's a comfortable job. That's a good idea. I can get it. Once I get it for government, I good.
Yes, of course. And that is what I get throughout the South Beach and other constituencies. Listen, I want a government job. That's simply not possible. All right. What we have to do is properly train our people to inculcate a sense of learning, a capability, and achievement. We do that by expanding the preschool educational apparatus in this country so that by the time they get to grade 1, which is the commitment of the Free National Movement, they are equipped. And not only that, as we indicated earlier about trade and vocational and technical subjects, when they enter into the 6th and 7th grade, they can have 6 or 7 years of training in a particular vocational field, which makes them employable. They don't need, therefore, to look outside for, say, for instance, a public service job, because now they are employable. And what it also gives the opportunity to is entrepreneurial chances for those individuals, because they would have come equipped, they would have had through high schools and possibly into the BTVIs or other tertiary education opportunities for certifications at levels 1, 2, and or 3. And they can now make a way for themselves. They form their own companies. They can go out and bid on jobs. So that is how you're going to drive the economic development, but also you're driving the skills, capacity of our baby.
Does DNA share a similar or opposing view?
We share similar views on that, in that I would just go a step further, and that is in the school system. For example, the high school, the middle school system, we would be teaching them how to become entrepreneurs also. How do you operate your own business? How do you, the kinds of things that go into operating a business, so that once that youngster leaves high school, if he does not want to go to BTVI, he does not want to go to the University of the Bahamas, he would have already acquired some skills that he can go and set up his own shop and probably employ some extra people to work with him.
Sounds good plans on both ends. Gentlemen, though, I think this makes sense. We're looking now to fix it at the entry level, at the basic level, which is where I think the emphasis should be. But what about those thousands who are already out of high school, past the tertiary level, or out there employed, working? What do we do about those people who continue to frustrate a process in the public service, or are simply unemployable and cannot get past a minimum paying job? What do we do about those people who've got another 30, 40 years of working on their lives?
Jerome, before I left the Ministry of Education, when I was Director of Higher Education and Lifelong Learning, with the assistance of the Commonwealth of Learning and with a number of people from what was the college, now the University of the Bahamas, and the Ministry of Education, we put together a plan to put in place a training program, an educational program for those people who were in this, who had left school but did not have any employable skills. The Commonwealth of Learning, they were assisting us with managing that program. We were going to do a pilot program here in Nassau and in Grand Bahama. But of course, the government changed, and the current government came into office, and that particular program was shelved. I can assure you that after the election, on the election of the DNA as the new government, that program would be put in place, and all those thousands of people who may need certain skills in order to get a job, or who may need to be able to just get some basic English and math so that they can start thinking of a job. It does not matter, and the program that we had developed, it does not matter how old you were. if you wanted to do some work in terms of further education, that was possible. We will bring that program online.
Jeff Lloyd, would an FNM keep the national training program? Would you institute something else?
No, of course. Why would you want to reinvent the wheel? This is another problem with politics as usual. There's a program that is out there that has some merit, it's working, needs improvement. Why would you want to discard that program? We have done that too often in our Bahamian political history. What we want to do is we want to take a view of all of that which is out in the society and make sure that it is meeting the needs of our Bahamian people. I want to make a point with respect to what Dr. Higgs is talking about, and that's exactly what the intention of the Free National Movement is. You've got a large segment of our population who are simply untrained. They've got to be trained. The public service is an example. They've got to be trained and retrained. And many of them are in need of what you call remediation courses or remediation opportunities. You've got this going on now to some degree in the South Beach constituency at the Anatole Rogers High School, but it can be vastly expanded, and it will be. It also needs to be transferred, additionally rather, made available at the C.V. Bethel High School, and it also is going to be. But you have private institutions that can offer evening institutes or, again, remedial courses and so on. But here's another thing, and we won't have the time to develop this: technology. Today, the busy man or woman, the parents and so on, who wants to upgrade their skills do not necessarily have the opportunity or have the time to go and visit a classroom, but they can do so at home, distance learning. And this is where the educational system has got to make technology available to those who are in the Family Islands, who want to improve their skills and who can do it at times which is convenient to them, and at the same rigor and vigor that they would have if they were in a classroom face-to-face with a teacher. That is the commitment of the Free National Movement, to expand the technological capabilities of education so that it can reach into the various dimensions and constituencies of our country.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I usually give you an opportunity to wrap up, but education is such a huge issue and so much to discuss. We certainly don't have enough time, but we've got a couple more episodes before we get into the election, so hopefully we'll have an opportunity to come back and talk again. But I do want to thank you. I think you did an excellent job in certainly espousing your various parties, platforms, and education. And certainly, I think there is a lot out there that is a lot of food for thought. And whomever forms the next government certainly will have a yeoman's task, continuing yeoman's task. And hopefully, certainly all of these ideas can be brought to the table. So thank you very much. Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
All the best to you, Drew.
Good luck to you. Thank you so much. We hope you've enjoyed our show tonight. Special thanks to Errol Bethel, Dr. Leon Higgs, Mr. Jeff Lloyd, my producer, technical staff, and of course you, the audience, for watching. Be sure and follow us and participate in our polls on Facebook, On The Record, Twitter, and of course we're also on Instagram. Just look for On The Record. Give us your feedback and of course your chance to get in on the discussion. Tune in next time as we continue to explore the current state of politics in our country on the road to general elections. Once again, I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you next time on The Record.